This video is brought to you by Wasabi Power.
Alright, so this video is going to be a long walk to water, and that is with great intention because this video is all about slowing down, taking in the change of the seasons, and what I'll be shooting this summer.
In the morning when I get up, I wish that we could stop and take each day. In the evening when I get home, always hope to find you all alone and out of harm's way. Every time I look around, I hope to find you looking back at me. You're everything I ever hope to see.
So I sold my Leica ME, and I am in the process of selling my other rangefinders. My Leica M8, which if you have watched this channel for any volume of time, you know I love very dearly. My Epson RD1X. I am selling basically all of my expensive cameras. This question came up in one of my QAs very early on in the channel.
Have you ever spent all of your savings on camera gear to the point where you have had to get creative financially?
And I love that question because it is so honest. And if we're being real, I would guess a lot of us have been in this circumstance where we may have overextended ourselves. I'm actively supporting 3 generations of my family, and it's just not where I want to put my money, especially when I know from experience, hashtag no bad cameras, that I can use anything and be absolutely satisfied. You give me this plant and tell me it can take a picture, I will use that. I'm more than happy to use any tool at my disposal, and I'm also frankly a little annoyed at hype, if you hadn't noticed. I'm just not a hype monkey. God, I sounded so valley right there. I know a lot of people get really hung up and they email me or message me, DM me, YouTube comment me with just looking for the perfect camera. It does not exist. And yes, of course, there will be cameras that click and don't, but that experimentation is yours to own. I have cameras that work for me. So I am gonna share now the camera that is working for me, is the camera that I will be spending my summer using. It is not a value camera. I don't recommend it. It has a lot of quirks and it is prone to failure, so please take this with a grain of salt. This is the Nikon V3, the Nikon 1 V3. The Nikon 1 system was a short-lived system. Nikon was trying to take a bite out of the mirrorless market, early days of mirrorless, and they jumped so hard into a format that ultimately failed in very little time. It's a 1-inch sensor. Everyone else was kind of trying to corner the APS-C market or the full frame market. They just decided to go, we're gonna make the smallest, fastest, best built system with a 1-inch sensor, which was a huge gamble and it did not pay off. Now, they are kind of collector's items, so they're not exactly a value bargain camera. There is a Nikon 1 V1, which I also really love, and I do have one of those. You can find those cheap. The issue with that one for me is there is a pretty significant EVF lag after you take a photo, so it doesn't, the refresh time is very slow, and there's no way to turn off picture preview. I would like to just keep shooting, and you can't do that until V2. V3, you can do that. It is definitely a bit of a hindered camera in many ways. But for me, what I love is particularly the V3 with this grip. You get a very DSLR-like experience in a very small body. This is a 10 to 100 millimeter lens. The crop factor on this is 2.7 or something like that. So it's a 27 millimeter lens to a 270 millimeter lens. I also have a 10mm pancake lens, which is like a 27-28 field of view on 35, and it's all fitting in this little camera bag. I also have a prime, this 17.5mm lens, super cheap plasticky build, but man, it's a real, sorry, 18.5. It's a really, really nice lens. I just love this system. But again, it's a horrible investment. Like, this is just not a good investment. I know this thing is gonna die on me and I'm gonna cry when it does, but it's so portable. And as a mom who's like constantly carrying too much, I mean, this is a big lens. This does go to almost 800mm though, like in terms of a field of view, and you can get crazy telephoto shots with this. I'm not a telephoto shooter until I got this, and now I'm really having fun with it. I just like that flexibility in the smallest package humanly imaginable. This is even smaller than Micro Four Thirds. Micro Four Thirds is obviously a larger sensor, probably a better camera overall. And you know, I'm sure there will be suggestions of like the GX85 from Panasonic or the Olympus EM5 or EM10. Those are all fantastic cameras, and that just gets further to the point that there are no bad cameras. And so this just happens to be what I want to shoot right now. I used this on my recent trip to San Luis Obispo to see my family for Memorial Day weekend. It was the best weekend ever. I just absolutely loved it, and it just further emphasized this desire to streamline and settle down and just enjoy the summer. It was the best. It was the best. And I think it's easy to lose touch with that and just get caught up in the hustle, caught up in the gear fucking grind, the YouTube like obsessive watching. I'm sure we do that because it feels like it's productive, but it's not productive. It's like suddenly hours of your life are gone that you could have been on a walk or you could have been gardening. Like,
Nose.
What the howling?
Nothing.
Mom, no, nothing.
okay, so other things that I have been shooting. I've been meaning to talk about this camera for a really, really long time. This is a Fuji Natura S. It's a Japanese only camera. They didn't make this in the States. It's a really, really fun, awesome little camera. It has a 24, I can't remember. And my copy is so beaten up. You can see like the lens cover doesn't totally close all the way. This has a very wide angle lens that is 1.8 or 1.9 f-stop. If I recall correctly, it's 1.9. 1.9 on the aperture, which is insane for a wide angle point and shoot camera. This thing is sick. I just love this camera, and I had two of them. I sold one. I kept the really beat up one because I'm going to try to refrain from being too rough, but I don't give a shit what my camera looks like. I just want something that works and that I love, and this fits in that category. And then this is my Fuji GS645S. This is an absolute beast. I love this camera. I've had this camera now twice. I just cannot seem to part with it. Like, I sell it and then I just buy it again because it's such a great camera. The glass on this is so sharp, has so much quality to it. It's a 645 medium format film camera. It is not reliable. It is a bit, tricky. I mean, like, when I put my first roll through this, I was out at dinner with friends and I completely got it wrong, and I hadn't used it in a minute, and messed up some shots in a big way. And then the next two rolls were totally fine, but it's definitely, it's a little finicky. This bar has been known to break. It's not a super well-built camera, but I just love the lens. So I just keep coming back to it. It is the wide version, so it's like about a 35mm equivalent on 35mm. That's redundant. But I love this camera. What else have we been shooting? Okay, this one is highly, well, maybe I'll save that one for later. So, of the famous Olympus series with the Kodak CCD sensor, you have the E300, which I've covered, but I gotta redo that video because it was my very first. I literally don't have a single sample image in it because I was not thinking that I was gonna actually do this for real. It was more for my own records. I have the E1, which I have reviewed. Love that camera, it's fantastic, but it is big, it is heavy, it is pro grade, it's weather sealed, all of that good jazz. There is the E500, and then the last in the series is weirdly, if I'm not mistaken, the E400 was the last. So this has the highest resolution. This is 10 megapixels with that same CCD sensor. I mean, not exactly the same, but it was a Kodak made CCD sensor, and it is tiny. It's like the tiniest of the lot, and therefore wonderful to travel with. It's also the last in the lineup, so it has like all the updated electronics and menus and all the things, bells and whistles. In terms of output, people always ask me like, what's the difference? Like, how do they all look? I mean, truthfully, they do have a slightly different quality between them, but they're all great. Like, I just am not that picky, and I F with my colors in post anyway, so to me, they're all great. I would literally pick anyone up off the shelf and be happy with it. Such a great camera. Loved this. It was so fun to travel with. This 25mm pancake lens is really fun. Not the best. I mean, it definitely has some issues optically, but just so small, so wonderful to travel with. And then I did also bring my 14 to 54mm zoom lens for this. This one's so damn big. This is my Pentax 645D, the first in their 645 medium format digital lineup, and it does have a CCD sensor in it. I actually remember hearing that it was a Kodak CCD, but I don't think that's, actually it is true, it is a Kodak CCD. I'm sorry, I'm like literally having amnesia and then remembering on the spot here. It is a Kodak CCD. It is not the best camera. I do love these Pentax lenses. This is for the 645 system, so these work on the film bodies. I then also use them, obviously, on the digital body. I sold my film body, so I don't have my 645N anymore, which I absolutely love that camera. I've been very attached to this. I don't think I can part with this one. I am like just, also there's just like really no value in these. Nobody cares about these cameras, so I couldn't like sell it for what I bought it for, so I'll probably just end up holding on to it. But I also just feel very emotionally attached to it, and I love it so much. What else? Oh, then I do have this one as well. And this is a relatively new camera for me. I haven't shot it extensively. I'm really excited to shoot it. It is so beautiful as an object. It's such an ergonomic pleasure to hold and shoot. It's big, it's heavy, but it's wonderful, and it's known as a king of color, so I really want to play with it and get to know it. This is the Nikon D700. Full frame, I think it's like circa 2000, oh geez, 2008, 2012, I don't know, somewhere in there, somewhere in the sweet spot of cameras that I love. And yeah, I really don't have very much to say about this because I have not had a chance to test it extensively, but I kind of want to try this for street. I feel like this is going to be a really fun street camera. And last up in my list of cameras that I've been shooting is this very rogue combo. So here we have, wow, I don't know, neighbors are out. Okay. We have a Canon G9, which is kind of an important camera for me personally. You can hear the whole story in my massive overlength video about all of my cameras. And I have this with a lens mate adapter that then has a R72 infrared filter on it to be able to shoot infrared photography. Infrared is very much out of my wheelhouse, and I've been really kind of taken with it recently, I think just because it's so experimental and so out of left field for me. But I am looking forward to trying to do a bit more of this. I've literally taken all of like 7 photographs with this filter so far. And there are definitely some limitations with using a filter because, for example, it's cutting so much light when you're shooting a tree or something like that. Any motion in the tree is going to be picked up as motion blur. So it's not like a true infrared where you can actually shoot at higher shutter speeds. I'm not ready to jump that far into the pool yet and commit to that kind of a thing. But yeah, I like playing with it. It's really fun. It's also a really cheap, low barrier to entry way to do this because the camera's cheap, the lens is cheap. I mean, the filter isn't cheap, brand new, but I just bought this off of eBay, made an offer to someone. Like, when you're selling filters on eBay, like, you can make an offer. There's going to be plenty of wiggle room to negotiate because it's just not a high selling item as far as I can tell. And yeah, they accepted it, and so I was like, hey, let's try a little infrared. So I'll close out this video with just like one more thing from Notes to Myself, which I'm not necessarily endorsing. I literally don't remember anything about this book other than there were some notes in there that I was like, as a 14-year-old, very struck by. If I had only forgotten future greatness and looked at the green things and the buildings and reached out to those around me and smelled the air and ignored the forms and the self-styled obligations and heard the rain on the roof and put my arms around my wife. And it's not too late. I hope you are all well. Enjoy yourselves, and thank you again to Wasabi for sponsoring this channel and supporting everything I do here. Have a good one.